Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening um, to everyone. Thank you for joining this session. I'll be presenting uh, on the Codementor events platform and uh, looking forward to a fruitful discussion with you all. With that said, and without any further ado, let me share the screen so that we can get this going. All right. The topic is navigating through layoffs, and it is very pertinent to the current scenario that we find ourselves in the technology space. Um, and I essentially the main driver behind uh, speaking on this is there's a lot of pessimism at this point, where the only news that you get to hear is the doom and gloom of the tech sector. And I wanted to leave you all with one parting thought of uh, it's actually the opposite. There is tons of opportunities, and this is possibly the best time to introspect and bounce back. And it's not at all doom and gloom, and it's actually a great opportunity. I hope that you all leave with tips and tricks to be able to better fight this difficult situation and to come out triumph at the end of it. So without uh, before starting and getting into the details, let me introduce myself. I am Chaitanya. I am a software engineer, a senior software engineer at Meta. I've been working here since 1.5 years. Before Meta or Facebook formerly, I was working as a software engineer at AWS for a couple of years. And before working there, I was a master's student at Georgia Tech. I'm a proud alumnus of Georgia Tech. So for all the jackets or yellow jackets out there, to hell with Georgia. Apart from studies, I'm an avid nonfiction reader. I love reading books. And in general, I'm passionate about mentoring, talking to fellow engineers and fellow software developers, just to keep myself aware of what's the latest in technology. All right. So let's dive deep into this. I feel we are surrounded by landmines at this point. As I said before, there's just a talk of layoffs everywhere, and it doesn't do us any good service by spreading negative information or pessimistic information of layoffs without really helping each other out in times like these. So that's the reason why I wanted to share my experience and share my knowledge with others who find themselves in tough spot right now, to better equip you to get the next job. uh, so that's the purpose. I'll be dividing this into a couple of phases. The first one is where it will be unidirectional, where I'll be speaking and sharing my context, and then I'll leave 15 minutes at the end for you to ask me any questions. I'll try my best to answer as much as I can synchronously, or otherwise we can do it async after the call. Uh, so let's start the first phase. I'll be talking on a high level of what's happening right now in terms of tech layoffs, and more importantly, how I would think about this, and build my mental model around it, so that you can then act and prepare for the scenario. So what are like what's the deal? Let's put things in context. We have seen more than 51,300 jobs or employees made redundant in the last month, November 2022 itself, across the world. Uh, Layoffs.fyi is one of the credible sources that I can quote for this data. And overall, more than 144,000 jobs have been made redundant in this year itself. The top names on the left, as you can see, one of both my previous and the current employer, Amazon and Meta, are one of the big ones to get a chunk of their employee headcount made redundant. But there's a huge list. Almost all the big companies, medium and small, across the board have uh, corrected or sort of addressed this situation by eliminating certain positions. But this is it. I don't want to talk about the sad story anymore, because I see there is a lot of potential and there's a lot of opportunity, and there is a silver lining to all of this dark clouds. And that is what I'll focus most of our time in. And I feel the first leg in solving this is through mental preparation, because that is where the most of the battle is won or lost. And the way I think of this is it's like a mind game, where if you acknowledge what the situation we are in, that literally helps you set yourself up for better preparation and clear focused effort towards get landing that next job. And the first thing to that is acknowledging that this is a cycle. And the reason why I say that this is a cycle is because, just like the boom and the busts of the economy or the financial markets, even jobs follow the same sort of pattern, where in an effort to hit the equilibrium, markets often overcompensate, either by hiring a lot of people, which is what happened in 2020 and 2021 because of the COVID boom. Uh, Employers and big giants like Google, Facebook, across the board hired like crazy. And that is where we went over and beyond and above and beyond what was needed, which is why, after a point, which is this year, folks realized that, well, we went way beyond what was needed, and now we need to get towards the equilibrium. And what's happening right now is, in an effort to get back to the median or the middle ground, they are again overcompensating by cutting more jobs than they are necessary. So as a result, why, if we know that this is a cycle, there will be phases where people will lose jobs, but there will also be phases where more people will get jobs than necessary. It just puts into perspective and makes this look like an objective topic rather than something which is subjective and truly personal. So it's not personal. It's bound to happen, and it happens across the board in any market. Second is, I would like us, especially software engineers or software developers, to acknowledge to sort of be thankful and grateful for the field that we are in, because not many positions can afford to enjoy when the rest of the world is suffering in COVID or in harsh financial times. More often than not, software developers and software engineers are shielded just by virtue of their work from the harsh realities. And unfortunately, we are now in a time where we are at the receiving end. So I would like us to still realize that there are more tougher roles and more tougher hardships that other um, occupations end up facing, which we don't. And uh, I would like to double click on that and say that you need to thank yourselves for being in a software developer or a software engineer role to not get affected by this as much. Because just like there are redundancies and layoffs, there are way too many other companies who are hiring, and that is what we need to focus on. That there are opportunities that are asking to be capitalized. We just need to reset and make sure that you figure those things out or figure those opportunities without crowding your mind or clouding your mind with doubt and pessimism. With that said, how would I prepare, or how would I sharpen the axe, in the words of Abraham Lincoln? To be honest, it's pretty simple. It's straightforward. It's just two things. One is to make sure that you have a proper, solid resume, which you'd be surprised not a lot of people have, and it's a sad state of affairs. But I've looked at so many into candidates, or um, yeah, software engineering candidates who do not do a good job of putting things down on paper and on their resume. So even if they have a solid profile, that does not get reflected well in their portfolio or in their resume. So that's the first. And second is to just make sure that you prepare well for the interviews that you will be appearing for. Um, and that's about it. Those are the two things that you should be taking care of. So one example I would like to give is my resume right now. As you can see on the right, it's fairly straightforward. Has a few social links with respect to my profile, like for example, the GitHub portfolio, my website, and a couple of links related to LinkedIn and GitHub. My experience, education, projects, and skills. That's about it. It's a one-page resume, which is tailor-made for um, any software engineering role in any company. Obviously, there will be some tweaks which I'll make if I were to apply to a particular role. But on a high level, this is what my resume will look like. On the bottom right, I've included a link to the overleaf template. If folks who are interested in codifying their resume instead of using the Microsoft Word or such services, you can leverage overleaf to codify it using syntax and stuff. Uh, I would like to call out four or five missing pieces I see generally when I look at people's resumes, and those are the first and foremost, like they lack numbers. And coming from companies like web service, Amazon Web Services, and Meta, I feel it's hard to overstate the importance of numbers, the importance of quantifying uh, what impact did you drive in your projects, in your experiences. And I would request, like, all of you who are part of this um, event to not make that mistake of missing out on stating the obvious, stating the metrics that you helped improve. And it's an easy win because it puts things into perspective. As a recruiter, if I know that you were able to improve the bottom line of the company by 5%, that's way more important or way more helpful than just saying that I improved the service and just using the word instead of number. So that's one call out. Another being that um, there are certain keywords which are expected when you apply for certain roles. Like, for example, when you're applying for a web developer role, if you don't use the metrics that are required for building a website, or if you don't use the terms like impressions, views, reads, uh, page load time, SEO, and stuff like that, if you don't have those words, then it means that you either did not do a good job or you did not portray your job correctly. Regardless of that, like, each role has certain keywords associated with it, and not having those in your resume means you are missing out on um, getting shortlisted or clearing the resume screen round, so to speak. Another point is, I personally prefer sorting my experience, sorting education and projects, all those in a reverse chronological order. What I mean by that is the latest experience and the latest project comes at the top, followed by the one before that, so on and so forth. It just makes it easy for a recruiter to know what are you doing currently and then trace backwards from there. It doesn't help you if you put it in a half-assed fashion using your own heuristic of what's important and what's not. And it doesn't help if you start from 2010 and then work your way to 2022. So I feel there's a lot of merit in going in a reverse chronological order. And fourth, which I haven't seen a lot of resumes, which is so weird, that have enough evidence baked into it. What I mean by evidence baked into it is, in today's day and age where everything is digital, it's not difficult to have your projects in some shape, form, online. It can either be GitHub projects, it could be even slideshows that you prepared for your academic project or hackathon, for example, or it could be a YouTube demo that you gave. Regardless of what format that evidence is in, I would just put that or embed that or hyperlink that in the resume. Because if I am a recruiter and I have a link, I might as well just go take a look at it. If I find it interesting, I will ask you questions related to it. In general, you are giving yourself a better chance to be shortlisted by peppering things and adding more content and context to your resume than by not. So these are a few things I felt are missing from the resumes and thought I should highlight over here. I'll be conscious of time. We're already 15 minutes in, so I'll keep going. In general, the second stage that happens after resume screen is you're thrown into the kitchen sink. You're asked to prove that you are a good coder by asking you coding questions. And I won't go into the details of how to ace a coding interview because there are tons of YouTube media, like YouTube videos, tutorials, books, like cracking the coding interview, and more importantly, or most importantly, platforms like LeetCode, which do a great job of helping you uh, ace or clear a coding interview. However, what I can additionally, what I can provide is a few things which you should keep in mind uh, while you prepare and while you actually appear for an interview. So on the left hand side, you can see that you might be asked a question like, for example, you are given a two-dimensional matrix with zeros, ones, and alphabets. And you might be asked a classical path walking sort of question where you start at 0, comma 0 index, and then you have to make your way through to the m, comma n. However, there are some constraints. For example, 0 is where you can access that cell. 1 is like a wall, so you cannot really breach that cell. And uppercase characters are, say, for example, locks, and smaller case characters are keys. And you cannot open a lock without a key. So, which means in order to go from 0, 0 to m, comma n, you need to first capture the lock, capture the key, and then open the lock. So, this is a classical path walking or a maze walking question with some additional constraints. We don't need to solve it. But what happens is when you're asked this question, um, most interviewees, I don't know why, but uh, the general tendency or the instinct comes in where you immediately start thinking of solution and solving the problem. And that's where the first sort of impression hits you hard and hurts you in clearing the round. Because what you forget or what you fail to remember is as part of coding round, what they're looking at is not just your coding skill or ability to land on the optimal solution, but they're also looking at your ability to understand the problem. And the first thing to do that is to not jump into coding straight out, but actually understand it well and make sure that the interviewer knows that you have understood the problem well. What are some of the ways to let the interviewer know that, hey, I have understood the problem is by first clarifying the understanding by asking questions like, hey, what happens if there is a non-alphabet or non-numerical character? How should I treat that? Also stating that, okay, stating in normal plain English what are we exactly trying to do also helps gain the confidence of the interviewer, saying that, okay, this seems like the candidate has understood the problem. Another thing to gain more confidence is by giving examples and counter examples for this given problem. Like saying that if there was the solution would be I would first go straight down and acquire the key B, then I would go and acquire the key A, and then make my way up towards lock A, unlock it, then make my way towards log B, unlock that, and then go towards the final destination. Uh, this is a solution which you can phrase it and write it and make and confirm whether that is the correct solution or that is the optimal solution for the given problem or not. Uh, you should also call out the edge cases, like what happens if there is no valid path, for example. And once the approach is confirmed that this is the right approach, you should proactively talk about the time and space complexity, because that is also something that the interview is expecting you to say. um, it shows that you understand what big O notation means, what complexity means and how it is calculated, so on and so forth. And only then you should optimize and then write the code. And across this 45-minute, 1 hour session, you should try and speak as much as you can and speak your mind rather than just thinking over and over in circles without really letting out what you're thinking, or letting the interviewer understand what you're thinking. So these are a few things which I found missing when I was interviewing a few candidates at Amazon or Meta. All right. This is just a humble brag on what my preparations were the last time I was interviewing. And the reason why I'm attaching this is for you to know that it's not about submission count. It's not about the number of questions solved, because there are 2000 plus and more additional questions added every day to lead code. And going for quantity does not help anyone, because what they are looking for is your ability to solve problems in an optimal way, and that does not have a lot of role or bearing in terms of the number of questions you have solved. Obviously, having as many questions under your belt helps you feel better prepared, but making sure that your fundamentals are strong, that you know what heaps or different sorting algorithms exist, what is the right way to approach graph traversal problems like breadth first search, depth first search, and to be able to quickly roll out code uh, that is related to the algorithm is of essence. So practice that more than just cranking out as many questions as possible. And finally, after you've prepared, um, what I would do is just three things. Like, reach out to your LinkedIn network, because I feel getting referrals is like having one step already in the company, because I would rather have someone who I know, I have worked with, or I can rely on, rather than somebody who I don't know. Because ultimately, this is a relationship that you're building when you're joining a new company. So I would definitely encourage people to lean onto their LinkedIn network, to tap onto their weak connections, second degree, third degree connections, and use those channels to find your way into the next company. There's also this new feature of easy apply that LinkedIn has rolled out, which is pretty cool, because then it literally obviates the hard work of building cover letters and filling in 4 or 5 page forms, because all you got to do now is just click on easy apply and your LinkedIn profile automatically gets filled in, and that's it, you have already applied to the company. However, one call out here is I have found it super valuable to track all the applications I have made in a single place, like a single source of truth, so to speak, in a spreadsheet, which allows me to keep tabs on where I have applied for what role and what's the status, because it easily becomes um, tough to manage 10, 12, 15 applications at one time. So having it on one page definitely helps. And last but not the least, use like platforms like Pramp and Exponent to get a lot of practice under your belt. Like, I personally used Pramp in March and April of 2021 when I was preparing for my interviews at Meta, and they helped me get comfortable with speaking and writing code simultaneously. Um, because it is a live session with other peers like yourself, who are also looking for another job opportunity, and they are in the same boat as you are, so they can double up as a good sort of partner to help you understand where you're missing, what points you failed to raise, what algorithm you messed up on. And in general, I felt it helped ease nerves a bit before going into the actual live coding sessions with real companies. So I would double click on Pramp using those as a service for mock interviews. And to just give you some evidence, this was how my tracker looked in Q2 of 2021 when I was applying for different roles in United Kingdom or London. And it need not be colorful, it need not be fancy. It can be as simple as just the name of the company, the position, who referred you into that role if they did, and what's the status, as in, are you still in the reckoning? Did the job close? Did you get an offer? Are you in the second round, third round? When is it lined up? And I've seen other people use different techniques, like just have a dedicated calendar and schedule interviews on that calendar to make sure that you don't forget. But I still find using spreadsheets powerful because it just gives you a holistic view of where you are at. And this is a snapshot of the platform that I was referring to, Pramp. Whereas you can see in the months of May and April, I practiced a lot of questions related to algorithms with with few of my peers, and it does a good job of randomly selecting questions of different areas, like not just arrays, but heaps and sorting and hash tables, so on and so forth. So it's in general, it was a very good experience for me personally. And that's it. Like in that's all I had to say. I would summarize that in general, do not feel that this is a one-off. It is going to happen again and again because it is a cycle at the end of the day. This has happened since probably industrial revolution, since people started working. That there is a boom cycle and there's a bust, and you would you would be better off being prepared all the time rather than worrying about it. And just be grateful that you are in a space where there are tons of opportunities. The sector is always growing. There's Web3 today, there was Web2 5 years ago. There's virtual reality, cloud computing. It just keeps growing, so there's no limit, so to speak. And we are still in day one, as Jeff Bezos says. It's still the start of a global trend of um, digitization. So there's a lot to there's a lot of things to look up to, rather than be sad about. And once mentally you are in the right frame of mind, it's just about then applying yourself to make sure that you prepare, and then you uh, track those applications and trust the process. Um, So I think I've done a good job of restricting myself under 30 minutes, which is what I wanted to do, so that I leave 15 minutes at the end if there are any questions. Uh, and I think with that, I will stop sharing my screen to see if there are any questions on the platform. Can you type the name of the platform and URL? So the I might have spoken of multiple platforms. As far as preparation for coding interviews is concerned, there's Lead Code. Uh, I know of others like HackerRank and Code Chef. They do a similar job, but I guess Lead Code is used a lot in my space or in my friend circle. Um, and as far as the preparation for mock interviews is concerned, I've used Pramp personally, so I'm a big fan of that. But I believe there is Exponent and few other services. I see someone else, Aaron, saying that there's also Code Wars. I haven't tried it personally, but um, I wouldn't be surprised that there are other options. Denise has a question with respect to how would you go about applying to jobs that ask for more experience or different stacks? Yeah, that's a good question. I would try to play the game where I'm strong at. So that immediate answer would be I would not apply to roles where I don't fit the experience, or the stack is something which I have no idea about. For example, uh, even if I studied a bit of Solidity, if someone gives me, or if someone asks for Solidity programming role, I would not consider myself a strong candidate, and that would not be the first set of companies that I shortlist or first set of roles that I will apply to. And I believe, reasonably speaking, if you are a web developer, if you are a mobile app developer, or you are quote unquote the backend engineer, there are tons of opportunities related to your stack already available and up for taking, which I would prioritize first before expanding my application space to other stacks or other roles which require more experience. So I hope that answered that question. So I would not really apply for those where where my experience doesn't fit or my stack doesn't match. But if I were to, then I would rather go with something um, which has the same stack as what I am used to, and just negotiate on the lines of experience. Because I believe, if even if the role says that you would need 8 to 10 years of experience, it seldom does happen that they would reject you outright just because you have like 4 or 5 years. They can consider you for a junior role, um, if you qualify, and if you clear the coding grounds. So there's value in applying for roles which are related to what you've done. Did you mean Pramp, the website? Yes, Winston. Pramp.io, I think that's the website. Uh, Let me focus on the Q&A. Can you share the resume? Yeah, at the end of this session, it will be recorded, and on the Codementor events link, I will share the URL of the template on Overleaf. Uh, that's where you'll find it. Definitely agree with being in the right frame of mind. Do you have any advice regarding getting into that state? Well, as I said, if you know the cause, or if you know that this is part of a cycle, it is essentially about accepting what it is and moving on, like going on with it, going ahead with your life, and looking up to all the great opportunities out there. Because I feel I've read multiple early stage startups have opened up their doors to latch on to the great candidate pool that is out there. Because big companies have laid off so many high quality, well trained um, engineers and developers, right now is the best time for early stage startups to uh, get good talent at a discount, so to speak. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity. So there's nothing to be worried about. What are your thoughts about ChatGPT and its effects on jobs and interviews? That's a great question. For those who don't know, ChatGPT was another language model. Language model is basically you can treat it as a black box, but essentially it will talk to you. It will spit out or it will generate content for you based on what you ask. So you can essentially interact with it as if you are asking Google search, but instead of asking Google, you just ask ChatGPT, write a resume for me, or write a application for software engineer role, and it will spit out uh, whatever it can. So that's what ChatGPT is. It is considered to be one of the breakthroughs of this year, um, given how powerful it is. But to answer your question about its effect on jobs and interviews, I think it's too early to say anything about it. It's a great uh, experiment, to say the least, but we have not explored the ins and outs of it. We don't know the limits yet, and it's not ready for production in any case. So your job interview should not be threatened by what ChatGPT has done. Obviously, on a broader level and on a long term time horizon, there might be some impact. But for now, I think there's absolutely nothing to be worried about. So Shahbaz says, I'm a backend developer from India. It is very difficult to get a remote job from US employers. How can I make it possible? First off, I'm not a remote employee, so I'm not the best person to speak about it. However, having said that, I know a few of my colleagues who are remote employees for US employers. To make it possible, what I've seen is they have either good name brand educational institutions on their resume, so either from IITs or triple IITs of India, or equivalent good institutions on their resume. So either that, or uh, uh, a good experience in engineering solid companies, or the companies where there's a good engineering culture, a good track record, uh, or if neither of these two, then just being able to demonstrate through open source contributions that you are a quality engineer, that you can think about and reason out solutions, and crank out good quality code. So this is what I've seen help folks who are applying for remote jobs. And to be honest, this is also good advice for anybody who's applying, to either have a good brand name on their resume, or to have good open source contributions to back up your claim, in case you don't have good names on your resume. So Kabir is asking, what advice can you give someone who's spent a couple of years in a different role and is trying to transition to software dev? What are his chances, and how can he position himself? My counter question for that would be, what role are you transitioning from? Because you could transition from a SDE test role, you could transition from data scientist role, you could transition from data engineer role, you could transition from enterprise engineer role. Like, there's just too many variations. But if I were to answer on a general level, and if I were in the shoes of you, like of Kabir, it would be tough to fight in this environment to get a job when already there are tons of software engineers who are looking for a software engineer role. So that is working against you. But I think, uh, given the talent and giving the ability to solve coding problems, you should not have a lot to worry about. Um, Obviously, it's going to be tougher, but as I said, it's not doom and gloom. It's still possible. And how would you position himself? It's justified to switch from role A to role B. So no one's going to uh, take that away from you. However, you have, when the recruiter asks you questions with respect to, okay, why do you want to be a software engineer now? You would have to come up with a cohesive sort of, or a logical response as to why you are now thinking of being a software engineer. It could be something as personal as, I've always wanted to be a software engineer, but I could not. So I started as a enterprise engineer, and now I have gained 4 or 5 years of work experience, and I feel I have enough under my belt to to interview and to work as a software engineer. And that might be your personal sort of response. But regardless of that, I would make sure that I have something, some story, and something to back up the claim, either through courses, through personal projects, through GitHub code, through open source contributions, to sort of justify this request of transferring or changing roles. Um, so someone has asked how to study different technologies. Do we have to finish one and study another? Or I can study one, and if I get bored, try another. Yeah, this is a classic conundrum that early stage or early career engineers often face, because there's hundreds of technologies to be learned, and there's never enough time uh, to learn all of them. And the honest answer I have is, you don't have to. I generally look up to technology or code as a means to an end, not an end in itself. So I am not a proficient Java developer or a proficient hacklang developer or a proficient PHP developer, but what I know I am is I can get things done. So which means I will know enough Android or enough Objective C or enough HTML, CSS to get that job done, and that's about it. So that's the approach which works for me. It might not work for you, but if I use that mental model, then there's never a point where I will finish or quote unquote complete my learning for one technology. It will just be I wanted to do task A, so that's why I learned multi-threading in Java, and I had to learn what it means by asynchronous requests, and that's it. I implemented it, and that's it. Move on. So I only learn as much as is needed for the task, rather than learning the technology out and out to be to be proficient in it. But that's me. Um, Swati asks, is it necessary to master a tech stack for entry-level software engineer roles, or shall I focus on fundamentals of different technologies? Um, I think for entry-level software engineer roles, you definitely don't need to be a master at it. I am not, and I can say that most of my colleagues, peers, when they were interviewing for entry-level roles, they were definitely not masters of a particular tech stack. However, so that just means that you need to make sure that fundamentals are strong. Because I did bachelor's in computer science, it was a spin-off benefit that fundamental knowledge of algorithms, operating systems, network, data structures was baked into the curriculum itself. So I knew object-oriented programming, I knew the core concepts in theory, and then it was just a matter of making sure that I couple it up with practical knowledge through internships, through personal projects, so on and so forth. So yeah, long story short, having a solid handle over fundamentals is table stakes. But beyond that, it's relative. If you want to continue growing, it's always good to keep learning. But being a master in a particular tech stack is not required. Any specific tips for grad students with 3 years of work ex looking for SEE? I'm guessing it's SWE internships and full time. Um, I've written an article on how to get your first, or how to land your first internship. I would redirect you to that. But the essence of that was there are platforms, like for in India, there is Internshala, and I believe in the UK there is Indeed, and in the US there will be equivalent platforms for you to apply for internship roles. In general, the entry barrier for internship roles is lower in startups than in the big tech companies. Um, but I feel, as far as internships are concerned, you don't really need to be in big tech companies mandatorily. The idea is to sort of understand how different your theoretical knowledge or the things that you're taught in school is from the real world. And that is the practical experience or practical exposure which you get uh, in, in internships. I'm being conscious of time. We have just a minute, so I'll just entertain the last question. I'm working in IT consulting industry, doing projects in financial services. Is it a good time to even try transition to tech industry or just stay in consulting? Um, Short answer is there's always going to be some, or yeah, like ups and downs, and the best time to do it is today, is what I feel. So if you think it's right for you to switch, just go for it. There will never be a right time. The best time is today. All right. I think I have answered most of the questions asked in the Q&A section, and we are also on time. If you have any questions, feel free to ask async. Happy to help. But with that said, you all have a good rest of the day, and take care and good luck with your applications. Thank you.